So welcome everybody to today's e-learning network webinar, which I'm delighted to say is being presented by Danny and Naomi from Virtual College, with special guest Simon from WW, as opposed to Weight Watchers. You're using the abbreviated term now, Simon, is that right?
Yeah, we went through a rebrand kind of 18 months ago, so it's part of our move to being more of a wellness company.
Excellent. So I will come back in at the end and talk to people about other things that the ELN is doing during these difficult times. We're going to use the chat, so feel free to drop your comments in there or any questions. But in the meantime, we are recording this session, so we'll put it up on our YouTube channel. So without further ado, I'm going to switch my video off and hand over to you guys.
Brilliant, thank you, John. Hi everyone, thanks for joining us. Just to reiterate, thanks for joining us this afternoon. Firstly, I hope everybody's keeping well. We're almost at the end of week 6, which is scary to think right now, but hopefully this makes it a little bit easier. So as John mentioned, I'm Daniel Braithwaite. I'm one of the learning technology consultants at Virtual College. We've also got Naomi Hepworth from Virtual College as well, one of our learning solution managers. I think she's going to give you a bit of a wave. There you go. And we've also kindly been joined by Simon Booth, Head of Learning and Development at WW, and as John previously mentioned, formerly known as Weight Watchers as well. And Simon's kind of going to be running a session all around rapid delivery. I won't give too much away, Simon. I won't steal your thunder, but I'll be coming a little bit later on in the webinar as well. So the title of this webinar, as you can see, is L&D and COVID-19, challenges, trends, and practical hints and tips. So hopefully over the next 45 minutes to an hour or so, you'll be able to take away some useful thoughts, tips and practical solutions back to your organisations. It would be great if you could start having a think about some of the key L&D challenges you faced post-COVID-19. And I'm sure some of these will be similar to the insights we've got to share with you, but we're also keen to hear others as well. So anything at all as we go through the entire webinar, please feel free to pop any questions or thoughts in the chat. Naomi and I will be keeping an eye on there, and we can stop at any point to have a bit of a discussion or pick up on anything that you're saying as well. So just to kind of let you know, firstly, all the insights we're going to share with you have come from heads of L&D and chief learning officers from over 80 organisations that have attended our roundtables over the last 5 weeks or so. I think we can all relate and we can all appreciate it's been COVID overload at the moment. What we really want to do as part of this session is take a step back, take a look at what L&D have really learned so far, especially over the past 5 weeks or so, because we're all in a situation which we never thought we'd find ourselves in. So let's have a look what we've been learning so far, really. So just to firstly just set a bit of context around our roundtable events and how they've had to change over the last 5 weeks or so. You can probably see on your screens at the moment some lovely pictures from some of the people that have attended. So we've been running these sessions for the last couple of years now, so quite a while, and they've been predominantly delivered face-to-face. Where we have created a community of L&D professionals, and we brought them together to discuss pre-selected topics. So what the hot topics are in L&D, and the people who are attending vote on those topics beforehand. And I think we can again all appreciate that whatever role you're in, we all benefit from being in a room with like-minded people. And that's exactly what we were trying to do when we set these roundtables up 2 years ago. And I think we've achieved that, and hopefully we have as well. We have obviously had to change the format of the sessions slightly due to the current situation, and we've been delivering these virtually over the past 5 weeks or so. So we really wanted to continue to provide that community and a place for those in L&D to offload really in some ways and hear each other's challenges and hopefully learn something new and take some practical solutions back with them. So bringing together these heads of L&D and CLOs from all industry, we have really created a real community group of professionals, and we've created a platform to discuss and share key challenges, hints and tips and best practice sharing, and really provide the individuals with practical solutions that hopefully they can take back. And that's what we want to share with you today, some of those real hints, tips and best practice sharing information from those sessions so far. So I hope this gives you a really good idea and a flavour of some of the organisations that attend these roundtable events. We do have a real diverse mix of professionals from all industries, including retail, charities, safeguarding, education, that you can see on the screen at the moment. We also have a number of SMEs that join us on a regular basis, and their insights are just as important and valuable as some of the kind of multinationals that we have that attend them. And sometimes it's just actually quite nice for the people that are attending to understand that everybody has very similar challenges, and actually it makes them more open to talk those through. So we just want to put it over to you just really quickly on a poll. I think John's going to share this poll with you now. So if you could just post your answers. We just want to, these are just some of the questions that are frequently coming up during the roundtable events. Like I said, these should be appearing, and it's just so the majority of them are just a simple yes or no answer. So if you could just take a minute or two just to give those answers, and then we can have a look at what people's thoughts and on them are at the moment, and whether these are key challenges for you. Naomi, I don't know whether there's anything in the chat at the moment. Anybody's got any questions or thoughts, or if there's anything actually, if there's something that's separate to these questions that are on screen, feel free to post some of your key challenges in the chat right now. But we'll give you 30 seconds or so just to complete that. Just let a couple more people give some answers there. I can see that we've almost got everyone.
Apologies, technical problem there. Got too eager. Bit too happy. Yeah, some really interesting percentages coming through there.
Yeah, I think what this really outlines is very similar to what we see at the roundtable events themselves. I mean, some of these answers is a real mix. Some people find it a challenge, some people haven't. We've got, I think the first one we've got, they're keeping the long-term strategy in mind time to time, or it's gone by the wayside, and that is something that we really have seen in the roundtable. It's been a real focus area for a lot of heads of L&D. And like I say, sometimes it is just nice for you to understand that other people are working in the same way. I mean, there's nobody in this session that's put it's fully front of mind, and that's probably right at the moment. And that's something that we really look to use as a discussion point in the roundtable. So we would do something like this before, where you would vote on the topics that you want to talk about, and then we can really start adding value to the topics that you might be challenged with at the moment. So thank you for completing that. It's really good to see the different answers on there. So Naomi is going to take charge really and start talking through some of the insights that we've had from these sessions so far.
Thanks, Danny. Yeah, press the right buttons at the right time, I think, might be helpful. Good stuff. So one of well, obviously Danny's talked through some of the advantages for the attendees, and some of the advantages from our perspective of us running these roundtables. But it's been really interesting having, I guess, so much intense time with these individuals over a short space of time, and what you start to really pick up from an insight perspective. We've started to try and categorise and theme some of those, partly to share out with everybody, but also as part of our own evolution of our own strategy working forward. Some of these insights, or all of these insights, might not be a shock. Certainly might be what you're reading on LinkedIn, etc. But we just want to frame the picture before we start jumping into some of the practical hints and tips that we've come across. So firstly, I want to talk about some of the insights broadly across the current landscape of L&D as a whole. And these are some of ultimately the 4 key areas that keep coming up quite commonly when we're talking about what the challenges are currently out there in organisations and in learning and development. And firstly, not a surprise probably to anybody, but that the operational priority is absolutely king at the minute. So keeping your business going and ensuring that whatever role you're in, whether that is in learning and development, whether it's in a more first operational role, that ultimately that seems to take the absolute key priority across the business. And that can have an impact in a number of ways. It can mean that projects that you're working on get sidelined. It can mean that the ability for you to be able to, or how reactive you need to be, speeds up. And certainly from a learning and development perspective, keeping everybody operational in a set of circumstances that nobody could predict has been probably the key biggest challenge that the L&D teams have been facing. It's getting people up and running on new systems, getting people redeployed out to the departments, filling in skills gaps, whatever that might look like, and some of these we'll talk about a little bit more detail, but operational priority is certainly key number one. Supporting individuals and people ultimately are, as we already know, right at the heart of any business, right at the heart of anything that you're doing, and being able to support individuals in a particular set of circumstances that has really shifted what work-life balance looks like. I think everybody will know somebody, if it's not you, who is trying to juggle more than one thing at home at the minute. Your individuals are going through a whole set of different health and well-being circumstances or thoughts or feelings that you maybe not have had before around isolation or stress and pressure or looking at resilience. And ultimately, we've already mentioned it right at the start of the call, if you're on there, about how much screen time we're on, how many webinars you're on, what that screen fatigue really looks like. So there's been some real people central, I guess, challenges as well as thoughts that learning and development teams have really had to pick up and run with. But actually on the flip side, especially the last couple of sessions that we've run on the roundtables, what's really coming through is that there's some real benefits and some real positives. So increased performance has been mentioned, an increase in skills and self-development. So that's either because people have had some downtime in some certain areas of departments, have been able to invest in learning and development, or has been self-developing in, on that just-in-time need. But definitely from a performance perspective, and how people have very quickly adapted to working from home. Things have actually really progressed, particularly in the last 10 days or so. We're hearing how that new normal is starting to really sink in and kick in. And yes, there's still challenges, absolutely. But it's been really interesting to see some of those positives coming through as well. Across the landscape, the other key thing is what that role of learning and development is, that requirement, and ultimately the ability to mobilise some of that. And that's come through in a number of sub-themes. So certainly there seems to be an increase in permission. So maybe some initiatives or projects or approaches that some of our heads of L&D have been battling to try and get leadership to sign off on over the last year, have suddenly had that permission granted in a very short space of time. There is definitely a feeling that that value has increased, and maybe some commentary like, if only we tried this earlier, or why didn't we try this earlier, and actually seeing how quickly how quickly that team can react, how quickly they can embed some of those new approaches, and how quickly we're seeing the results of those has really increased the internal value of that learning and development function. And I think it's a really great opportunity for that particular team to really showcase their ability and their skills in this time. So it's been really great to hear some of that coming through. And broadly, not for every sector, but broadly most sectors, there has been a little bit more time and for some of that training. So we've been able to work with some of our customers, particularly on really trying to get caught up in some areas that maybe we're a bit behind on, or get some of those initiatives rolled out. And that connects really strongly actually with that flood and famine feeling, whether that's across the industries or whether it's in your organisation as well. So there's a real roller coaster that teams are going on, and find it quite hard to plan their resource and predict their resource, because you either need something immediately tomorrow for hundreds of people, or actually you've got a few weeks to maybe consider what that next phase might look like. So how head of L&Ds particularly have been able to plan their team's resource. And we've had some who've come on and said, I've been absolutely flat out, and then they've come to the next session and said, actually we're starting to look at furloughing for my team. So it's really unpredictable at the minute, and that's causing quite a lot of issues as well.
Yeah.
And then the technology, absolutely can't go without talking about technology and what that's meant for training, for digital training, but also the impact on face-to-face delivery as well. So platforms, systems and softwares have been needed in the last 5 to 6 weeks more than ever. And it's been a real aid in a lot of circumstances of us having this session. Certainly today, team meetings, check-ins, breakout sessions, virtual classrooms, online delivery, whatever that might look like. Our technology and the evolution that technology has gone through over the last few years has actually really enabled a lot of businesses to carry on, or to be able to cover that need digitally where they need to. but it's also been a barrier. We have got individuals who are just not that comfortable with technology. You need to upskill really quickly. We're being bombarded from absolutely every direction in our work life as well as in our social life. There's so many online evening get-togethers, drinks, quizzes, whatever that might be, that actually that technology probably felt really overwhelming at first for a while, until everybody got a little bit more used to I guess keeping that momentum going and getting used to that. So they're the 4 key things landscape wise that we've been able to sort of come away and get a sense of from our discussions. Danny, has there been anything in the chat?
Yeah, Mandip's put a couple of questions in there. His first one was around have many individuals been talking about digital fatigue, and I know you just briefly mentioned it there, and it's something that I think Naomi's going to touch on a little bit further. The simple answer is yes, it's coming up quite a lot, and Simon mentioned something just before we kicked off on this session around we're not that familiar with digital fatigue. It's as simple as what Simon said around that you can't read somebody's body language as much through a webinar or a virtual classroom like this, and that does fatigue your mind a lot quicker than if you were sat in a room with somebody and you could read it straight away. So I think that was a really key point, and it is definitely something that's been discussed, so you're not alone there. And then the second question was around, not really a question, but it's difficult to keep L&D strategies at the front of mind as we are unclear of what the future holds. And I think just to probably reassure you there, that is very common in the conversations that we're having in our roundtable sessions, and I don't think it's wrong to do that. I think that some of the discussions that we've been having are actually it can't be right at the forefront of our mind right now. We need to deliver on what the business needs and what the people need within the business. But I think L&D professionals know that over time, we're now in the 6th week, I think L&D professionals are having a little bit more time to really now step back, look at their long-term strategy and look what they can implement right now that's going to affect that. So yeah, you're definitely not alone there again, and it's definitely something that's coming up.
Yeah, good. And I completely agree. And I think whilst none of us can predict exactly what the future looks like, I think there are a lot of hints right now as to how we've reacted to this situation that can help us plan for future. And we'll touch on some of those when we look at the future of L&D a little bit later. But yeah, a real common question coming up, or a common thought process coming up. And so to dive more specifically into learning and development teams, and have a little look at some of the common things that are coming up in relation to that. So firstly, L&D teams are absolutely prioritising struggling that work shift. We talked already a little bit about new technology. We talked already a bit about managing operations and prioritising operations. But I think there's also a bit of a struggle to justify anything that's not absolutely deemed mission critical, which is right on one hand, because we've got to ensure that operationally we're strong. But on the other hand, there's a real nervousness, I think, from the L&D community that we are at risk of throwing all the good out that we've been working on evolving, and that there are some real crucial elements that the business might not perceive to be really crucial, but are certainly really, really crucial for us to get right. The other key thing from a work shift is really supporting individuals, and particularly looking at management teams. So management and the role of management comes up really commonly as well. How are managers able to support their staff, not only with more people management, but also with performance management? And so you're not able to get that visibility maybe on the outputs that you've maybe had so far. How do you start moving your teams to more of a results-driven culture? And how can L&D teams support managers at this particular time to improve their performance and coaching skills in order to ensure that those teams are delivering what they can? And that adaptation to remote working and that culture shock, this is a whole different working culture in for some organisations, for some who have been used to working maybe in this remote way for a while, less of a shift, but ultimately everything that has come within the last 5 weeks that's been a change, it will result in either a communication or a skill or a training need, and obviously that's been a really key focus for L&D teams to really ensure they're supporting that workforce. There's been some nervousness raised, some concerns around, I guess, the integrity of what learning and development sort of is, I guess, and what the delivery looks like, and what that focus and that strategy is. There's a nervousness that speed is going to reduce quality, that some of those really vital focus areas are going to get forgotten about, and I think there is a balance with that. I think because of the permissions that have been given and the value that's been raised on L&D, I think there is a much more of a braver opinion coming forward. And I think if individuals and organisations can really listen to what L&D is saying within their function, and really take hold of some of those more braver approaches, there's a real chance that we can certainly see a lot of benefit from this particular moment in time. And actually use this opportunity as a proof of concept. I talked a little bit about a scientist's dream earlier. You know, this is the biggest social experiment and work experiment that we're ever going to face. You know, if you'd said back in November that we're all going to be in this situation now, not sure anybody would have believed us. But we are. There is a lot of benefit to thinking about how you record the impact of the changes that are happening at the minute. Because if this is an experiment, in some ways a trial, new ways of working, let's use this opportunity to put some measures behind that, so that when we are starting to evolve and move forward, you can look back and reflect and say, right, well, actually, we're able to measure the impact pre and post throughout this change, so it's worth considering. And I know some of the organisations we've been talking to have been really strong on recording that evidence in order to be able to make recommendations going forward. And I guess the last thing connected to that, around that integrity, is that there still is a bit of a perception that learning is only ever scheduled, and that learning is only ever, you know, that particular moment in time, or that classroom session, or whatever that looks like. And so there is a chance, again, for L&D teams to really influence in organisations and individuals to re-educate maybe on some of that perception of learning and taking on new skills is happening all day, every day, and this is a great way to be able to showcase some of that. L&D teams, I've not got my animation quite right. You had all that in one go, but never mind. So L&D teams are also really prioritising people, and that's things like the health and wellbeing training, things on resilience, on stress management. There's a real cry out for some of those resources, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more in the tips and tricks as it comes up. And a real focus on self-development. So if you've got an opportunity within that flood and famine, when it's that famine time, for that bit of downtime, how can you really leap forward in your own skills? So we've had people signing up for some of the authoring softwares like Articulate, and saying, you know, that's not normally what I would do in my personal role, that's normally somebody else, but I'm going to learn how to do that. And that really helps with some of that rapid delivery, but also just gives I guess a chance to try and fast track some of your own skill development, or maybe pick up on some of those promises you made yourself in your last appraisal, or whatever that looks like. But there's definitely some self-development going on across L&D teams, which is absolutely brilliant to see. That speed of delivery, absolutely, and balancing that quality over quantity, and being reactive, being agile, has led into a couple of things like a real increase in curation. I think there's still certainly a role to play in filtering that curated content and making sure it's relevant and right for your organisation, and hosting it in a way that's easy to access and able to I guess feel confident that it's going to be used in the right way. But there's a real opportunity to use some of the absolutely brilliant stuff that's out there. There's bagfuls, as you'll know, of webinars, of TED Talks, of resources, infographics, whatever that might be. So we're seeing a real increase in teams saying that, you know, forget about developing it, let's just get out there and find what we can find. And being brave on that new software launch, and really trialling some new softwares and launching that quickly, using this as an experimental time is really, really key. And I guess, and this links in not just necessarily with what L&D teams are doing, but what we're all doing at the minute, which is just being incredibly human in the way that we are working. So that human touch point, that face-to-face, whether it's through a breakout session or a workshop, I think the really key thing is that sort of human interaction, that connection. And what we've seen broadly across the board is that our relationships with our clients, with our partners, with our colleagues, those barriers, maybe some of those professional barriers, are really starting to come down a little bit in really, I guess, considering some of the language that you might use, considering those behaviours. There's been loads of meetings that I've started recently. It's been a good 10 minutes before we've even got to talk about anything to do with what that meeting was, because actually what we're doing is just checking in with each other, sense checking everyone's all right, and the relationships that we're having people are definitely changing. So how can L&D ensure that they're keeping that human? It's just really thinking about those delivery mechanisms, trialing different approaches, making sure that's blended as much as possible, and that connection is really retained so far. Anything to shout out, Danny, so far in the chat?
No, not yet. John's agreeing with a lot of the things that you're saying there, which is always good.
Oh, absolutely. We always like a bit of feedback, certainly, and good to hear that I've got the go-ahead from Joe and I've got it right, which is good. Fantastic. Okay, so now let's start to think about what that means practically. They're sort of the key things more broadly across the landscape, or more specifically our L&D teams. But what specifically have some of those individuals in those organisations been doing? What's been working really well? And we've gathered some of those top tips across a number of, 4 key areas. I'm going to start with health and wellbeing. So in relation to health and wellbeing, what's been working particularly well? So firstly, leading from the top. Again, and some of these might be a bit obvious. You might have heard them before, but these are some of the golden nuggets that we thought have worked really well. But when we've been in a breakout session and somebody's saying, I'm really struggling with my health and wellbeing engagement with people, I'm not sure it's quite right, and I'm nervous that we haven't quite got the communication right on it, whereby people are saying that it's been led from the top, it seems to have been working a lot better. And I think that's partly because there's a vulnerability. If you can show vulnerability, whether that's as a manager, whether that's as a leader in your organisation, then there's a real common understanding that everybody's going through the same thing. So there's something around giving that permission, like recognising it's okay to talk about it, and if that is led from a top-down approach, then other people are much more open to saying, you know what, I'm struggling as well, or yeah, it's also been a bit of a crap day, and I think that's really, really key to make sure that that's something that is encouraged, and certainly feedback has been that when that's done top-down, it works a lot better. We talked already about curation, in relation to the amount of resources that's out there on health and wellbeing, there is a phenomenal amount, which is absolutely brilliant. But the biggest value, I think, that you as an L&D leader can sort of play within this role is to find what's out there, but particularly point to sources of truth. There's a lot of contradictory information. It's not always necessarily easy. While there's lots of stuff out there, it's about knowing where to find it and putting it in a place that people can find without asking. Everybody will have a different comfort level on how confident they feel about telling you, their own temperature check on their health and well-being. So if you can put it somewhere that's available, easy to find, and it is really supportive and practical, then I think that is something that can be really of value currently at the moment, and certainly something that I know some of our L&D teams have been doing. The other one is around a mindset. If you schedule health and well-being as you would any other agenda item, it is absolutely as important as checking in on how's the tech working for you? Are you managing to get through your target list of data? Are you able to pull together those financials? Whatever job and function that individual is responsible for, have a chat about that health and well-being, and think about what that might mean from a company-wide perspective. So some great ideas that are coming through are, for example, having a weekly topic area led by internal experts. You've got a panel of different individuals that are particularly knowledgeable or already passionate about health and well-being, who can take a lead and do a 15-minute overview or create or curate some information that's really useful. So use your internal experts as much as possible, turn yourself from 1 or 2 individuals in a team to an army of individuals who can really support with that. And the more that those experts are known, hopefully you start to encourage an organic shift in people reaching out to each other, rather than the responsibility being in L&D leadership or with management. So that's something that was mentioned that I thought was particularly pertinent as well. And then considering the messaging of furloughed staff. I mean, I never heard the word furloughed, 2 months ago. Didn't know it existed, didn't know what it meant. Probably a lot of people are the same, and suddenly it's part of our everyday vocabulary. And what that process has been difficult. It hasn't been easy for a lot of individuals or organisations, and actually there is a duty of care and a responsibility for managers as well as leaders, but there is a real opportunity to use training as a positive mechanism, so those individuals can still be supported on training. They're still employed by your organisation, and therefore it's a really great chance to upskill, to reach out, to give them some self-development goals, and to really consider what that means in relation to their own sense of value. So a real chance, I think, for there to be a real positive out the back of it. And I think some of the thoughts that people were sharing was that they were concerned that there was a stigma or a perception around that, and what that meant for those individuals' health and well-being, and can we make sure that those networks that we've got internally are still open to those individuals. So really key in that sense, certainly. Any words of wisdom on the chat, Danny? Any other suggestions that have come through or comments?
Yeah, so Sarah's just put in there, after being redeployed for the last 5 weeks, she's back in the L&D world this week, so it's good to have you back, firstly. And she's glad to see that what their focus is on is the stuff that we're discussing. And then after that, I've just put sometimes actually a bit of reassurance is all we need. And that's what happens quite a lot in these roundtable sessions. We often call it counselling for L&D. Because I think I mentioned it at the start, sometimes it's just, some people are just find it really comforting that other like-minded individuals have the same challenges. It's not just you, what you're doing is the right thing, and other people are doing it as well. So yeah, I think stick with it. It sounds like you're doing everything that's coming up in our sessions as well. So yeah, that's what's come through so far.
Real fantastic. Yeah, and any other tips that you have, Sarah, would be really, really great to hear. Yeah. And yeah, absolutely, just a refresher, a reminder, a reassurance. These sessions sometimes just leave you feeling like you're on the right track, and might push some of the stuff that have been forgotten about possibly right back to the top of the list as well. So really great to hear that this is resonating. Next sort of key theme for top tips was looking at evolving the L&D strategy. So we asked a few questions earlier around what that L&D, went too far. What that L&D strategy, how you're feeling about L&D strategy, were you in control of it? Have you had to stop working on the long term and start working on the short term? And we've had this discussion at length in a number of our sessions recently. So these are the key things that are coming through from a tips perspective. So ultimately, first step is redefine absolutely everything. So firstly, redefine what your business critical training needs are. They might not be the same as they were 3 months ago, and they might not be the same as what they are in 3 weeks' time. So that is something that continuously needs a look at. Have a think about where your soft skills are sitting. So soft skills gets a bit of a rough time broadly in relation to priority and budget, in comparison to maybe compliance training or job role related training. So soft skills probably is an area of development that we need to focus on anywhere, but even in these circumstances whereby, you know, communication's really key, being able to run effective meetings is really key, some of those people management approaches are really key. Can you look at trying to prioritize some of that in your current strategy and for the longer term, as we're going to need to continue potentially working this way? That TNA that might come out of your reprioritizing of your business critical stuff, conduct it as quickly as you possibly can. So there's people who say that, you know, I only did my TNA, you know, 3 or 4 months ago after appraisals, whatever that might be, but we're going to do it again, and we're going to do it at least every 3 months. Because as you keep moving individuals around, whether that's redeployment and whether it is a change in your business, I guess, priorities and what that means for skill sets, there's going to be continuous training and learning gaps, I guess, that people are going to need some support on. So don't assume that your TNA once a year or once every 6 months is going to hold. You're going to need to do that a little bit more quickly. Might want to consider as well thinking about some of that re-onboarding. So we all went through our induction, and obviously you induct anybody who's new, and you might do a refresher on an annual basis of policies and procedures. But somebody recently said, we're going to re-onboard our staff, and that sort of term really stuck. So it ultimately is about recognising, I think, we are working in a potentially different way, and you obviously need to make a judgment depending on how different your working culture and your working world is today than it was 6 weeks ago. But that's something to consider about. Maybe there's new expectations, maybe there's new responsibilities, maybe there is that shift in the way that you're expecting individuals to behave. It might be worth thinking about a re-onboard. It might frighten everybody if you did it tomorrow. It might be a drip feed, but certainly something to consider. Another thing to redefine or redo, if you haven't done already, to think about some of your training personas and personalities. Everybody has different learning styles, different ways of working. Some people love to learn in a group environment. Some people love to learn in a TED Talk, by watching TED Talks, whatever. But I think it's about rethinking some of those personas in this current set of circumstances, and then connecting that to the approach to development, curation, or resources that you already have. And then maybe sharing that out with your managers. So again, that sort of reliance on managers to be the connection out to individuals, that's really, really core at the minute. And if they're much more knowledgeable in suggesting the right types of approaches to cover that learning need, in relation to that learning personality that individual and their team has, much more likely to get a better outcome overall. So those are some of the redefining tips that have come through. And finding ways to shift learning into the everyday. We talked about almost that perception that learning only happens at a scheduled time, and whether there is a bit of an education piece, but maybe it's about responding really positively. So when people are sharing, oh, I read this myself, this article, or I learned how to do this, I will learn how to use this feature just by watching a YouTube clip. Maybe it's about shining in on some of that news and sharing some of that news across the board, so that it starts to become quite common knowledge. That is a really good way to be able to do that, and some of that self-development. So as part of your learning and development strategy, if you're looking and thinking about how you want people to be even more self-driven in the future, what does that mean for what you need to change in your strategy now? Is that rather than immediately put in place a piece of e-learning or just certainly a classroom piece, it might be saying, you know, these are some of the challenges that we know you have. This is where you can find the information. Let's have a workshop once you've read it all to share what we've learned so far. So there's an action of self-development before you even start that workshop, and it starts to encourage that more organic shift into self-development learning. But that's something you might want to consider in your L&D strategy. And that links really closely with that just in time. I have learned more on what systems and softwares I use in the last 5 weeks than I have probably in the last 2 years, because I need to use it there and then, and therefore that's when I'm going to invest time in trying to learn something. It's no good me in a course 3 months ago, it won't stick. So just in time needs to be part of your L&D strategy going forward. That's come up and cropped up a lot. In relation to a real shift in the focus on what types of things people are developing, and starting to really plan for much more of a permanent shift. This is still blended. This isn't about removing the elements that of that face-to-face or that workshop or whatever that might look like. That's still retaining that. That's really vital. You absolutely cannot close a learning need down in one fell swoop with 2 hours of online content. It doesn't work in that way. But there is going to be a much more permanent shift into digital. This might not be the last lockdown we go through. And what it's definitely shown is that businesses are not prepared. We've not been prepared so far for that shift at the level that we've had to over the last few weeks. Now, actually, very positively, very much L&D heads in our sessions have been saying, you know, this is the shift we want to make anyway. This is the direction we've been heading in anyway. This has just leapfrogged it massively and really quickly into a much more embedded version of what that digital looks like. But we're going to expect it to come even more. So that needs to be part of, if you're thinking for strategic purposes as well. Any extra thoughts on the chat there, Danny?
Yeah, Katerina's mentioned that they've moved some of their in-person training to a mixture of e-learning modules and video sessions. So Katerina, I won't take too much thunder away from Simon, because I know he's going to touch on how they've done that. So I'll leave that with you, Simon. I know you're going to be talking in a couple of minutes. And then Mandeep again mentioned about reboarding is going to be huge in his opinion, but also ensuring that they establish the new skills required when they go back to our normal working lives. And something that got mentioned in one of the last roundtable session actually was around, can we develop content that can be delivered both face-to-face and online? Because all of a sudden we become a lot more efficient, and that training strategy, that training delivery method can become much more efficient as well, and you can give people the option, especially for when you're back into normality. So yeah, I completely agree with Mandeep on that one, and Katerina, watch this space for Simon.
Brilliant. I'm going to whiz really quickly through the next one because I think I'm slightly over time and I want to make sure we've got enough time for Simon to share his thoughts. So in relation to some of the tips we've heard on rapid digital delivery methods, and that's come up already, are people having to move very quickly from traditional methods into more online methods, and what does that look like? Some of the tools that have been recommended, Articulate, Captivate, Elucidate, VC, we're all offering free trials at the minute. Use them to your advantage. It's really a great opportunity for you to get out there and try to develop some new skills. Maximising curation, which we've already talked about, your curation army, so not just your health and wellbeing army, but think about what skills you and experience levels you've got internally in the organisation that will allow you to pinpoint people or direct people, or alternatively get hold of that knowledge and expertise and turn it really rapidly into something that you can get out there, and that's certainly really key as well. And as mentioned, it's not all right, it's okay if it's not perfect, it's not going to be, and give yourself that leeway, and I think people are supportive of that. They know that they're not going to receive something that's that high quality level that maybe we'd seen, but you might have developed before. And then last one, really quickly, talking too much, is the some of the tips that we've heard on softwares to communicate, manage, and organise and adapt. And I'll I guess sort of let you have a quick read of that as an overall, because it's probably pretty self-explanatory. But communication is really, really key. Making sure that people are really aware of what to expect, where to find it is really, really important, and your role within that it plays a really vital part in ensuring that that's supportive. And just right at the bottom there's a couple of tools and tricks for organising and managing that people have recommended as been lifesavers in the last few weeks. You might want to check those ones out as well. Right, wrap that up there. I'm going to hand you over now to Simon, who's going to share his experience of some of the challenges he's been through the last few weeks. Simon, hopefully you'll be able to take the controls from here, and over to you.
I think you might need to unshare, Naomi, just so
okay. One moment. Bear with. There we go.
Okay. Okay, hi everyone. So yeah, I'm from WW, and I've just come today really to just present a little bit of our response to the COVID-19 pandemic, which looking through the slides that Naomi and Danny have kind of presented already this afternoon, there's definitely some links there and kind of those 4 key buckets in one of the early slides. So as we've already mentioned, I'm from WW, and you may know that better as Weight Watchers. So we went through a rebrand kind of 18 months ago and are now known as WW, and we're a wellness brand. So we are here with a brand new purpose, which is to inspire healthy habits for real life. So for people, families, communities, the world, and for everyone. We've got about 5 million members around the world, and what we offer is a digital subscription for our members, which is using our app, but then also an in-person and digital experience as well, and we call that workshop and digital. Now, if you attend one of our workshops, it means you come to a physical space once a week. You have a one-on-one experience with one of our coaches about your wellness goals. A lot of our members are weight related, obviously, and then you take part in a 30-minute conversation, community inspired discussion on different techniques, but again really fueled by the people who attend, sharing their celebrations, their successes, but also their challenges. Around the world we have 20,000 of these. Here in the UK it's around 4,000, and powered by our team of 1,000 coaches. Now our coach force, just to give you a little bit of background on them, they're all remote based, and they all use corporate iPads as part of our system to track data and conduct their wellness check-in. But they all have differing levels of ability with the iPad and with tech overall. And I've been here now for 10 years, and moving to a more digital platform has been a real struggle for us, and we've been met with lots of resistance, and that's a lot of it due to people's confidence and understanding of how to use technology. Linked to that, they are real lovers of traditional in-person training, mainly because with them being remote-based, they then get to come together and be with one another to be a part of some of those learning experiences. And we did start to launch kind of our digital learning strategy last year with webinars, And again, some people loved it. They could do it from the comfort of their own home, sat on the sofa. Whereas on the other side, we heard from people, it's not my learning style and I really struggle with this, and I really wish this was face-to-face and don't want to do digital learning anymore. But what I can tell you about this group of people is that they are incredibly passionate. So a lot of our coaches have actually been members and have been impacted by a weight management program or focusing on their wellness. And a lot of that then drives their passion to want to help others to have that as well. So a lot of the reasons why they're with us is to help others. And we have a mixture of people. Some of them work full-time for us, and for a lot then we're a second job where they maybe work in a corporate role, kind of 9 to 5, and then in an evening might pick 1 or 2 workshops up for us. That's a bit of a background of who we are and kind of the team that we work with. And then in relation to kind of COVID-19, we were a little bit ahead of the curve in terms of understanding we needed to change our offering for our members quite dramatically, because no longer could we have them coming into our physical spaces due to social distancing and the lockdown going on. So to kind of talk you through the timeline of what that looked like, it was the 14th of March when our CEO, Mindy Grossman, announced that we were going to move to virtual workshops. And this was happening around the world, so in all 20,000. And we communicated to our members that we would be pausing our workshops for 3 days and that we would be back on the 19th of March. So the announcement was made Saturday internally, Sunday to our members, but we said we'd be back on that Thursday. So what that meant is for a UK team, we had to train 1,000 coaches on how to run a session using the Zoom technology with our members by Thursday. So as you can imagine, that kind of mobilized quite a few teams globally and locally. So customer experience, marketing, the L&D and people, but also tech and legal were drafted in to kind of look after their own areas. By Monday the 16th, we were then able to start delivering some of our blended learning. So obviously this was turned around really, really quickly. And that consisted of a 60-minute e-learning module to complete first. And that went live on the Monday lunchtime. And that consisted of all the knowledge that our coaches would need to know. And they needed to do that piece of learning first before they then attended a 90-minute webinar. Now, due to people's other roles, kids being at home, kind of lockdown coming in, we scheduled 20 webinars for all of our 1,000 coaches, really focusing on those who needed it most were those who were going live first. So those coaches running workshops over Thursday, Friday, Saturday, we tried to make sure they got onto the first workshops, the first webinars. But we also didn't cap it at a small number. Historically, we'd maybe have only 10 to 15 on a webinar to make it interactive, to keep the learning group small. But we maxed it at 100 this time, just to make sure we could suit everybody's needs. We went live the very next day, kind of Tuesday, on the 17th of March at 1 o'clock, and we maxed out at 100. And it was like that for the next 7 to 8 webinars that we ran. To the point that within 30 hours, kind of by Wednesday evening, we'd trained 800 coaches. Typically, training 1,000 coaches on webinar would take me 6 to 8 weeks and 80 sessions, and we'd have, as I've mentioned, real resistance. But within 30 hours, we'd actually trained kind of 80% of the workforce. Us kind of looking back and looking at our key learnings from this was around communication, and that being really, really key. So making sure we're communicating daily to our coaches, but really always talking about the why. Why was it really important that we did this move for our members, but also talking about our expectations, which was on an earlier slide that Naomi talked about. We always kept saying to coaches, we're not expecting perfection. The majority of the learning you're going to be having here is when you get on the job, when you run that first one. So just helping coaches understand that they were going to make mistakes, but they were ultimately going to learn and make them better time and time again. The second tip was all about blended learning. So we know people have different learning styles. We absolutely designed in a minimum viable product way and got what we needed ready first in terms of the e-learning and the webinar. But since then, we've then been building on that with then more resources. So we've kept videos going. We've got job aids that people can go and review. They can go back and do the e-learning. So that whatever learning style you've got, you could go back and learn in your best way possible ready for your first virtual workshop. And we use Workplace here, that's powered by Facebook, as kind of our internal communication system. So we're really able to draft in social learning as well to aid this. So it helped everybody feel connected. So everyone was obviously in the same situation in terms of needing to get that training really quickly, but it also helped encourage people to share their experiences, how the training was going, how the webinar attendance was like, but also then what their first experiences and learnings were when they went live with our members. And we've been able to carry on using that to our advantage with then follow-up training campaigns and communications as well. Lastly then, in terms of from a digital strategy for us, kind of what has this real rapid kind of intense 10 days, 2 weeks that we had, how is that kind of shaping the future for us? What we identified is when people are really committed to the why, the reason why we need to do this change, they're more engaged and more resilient. So we're going to make sure we're always communicating the why more and as early as possible. Even though we're getting feedback that you know, virtual learning wasn't the preferred style for somebody or wasn't the right thing, actually we do know is that it does work, and we've taken the learning of doubling up on webinars. So one L&D person actually facilitating and enhancing the learning, and someone else there kind of being the co-host and supporting with the chat function, the troubleshooting, the tech side as well. I'm sure you've heard of the high challenge, high support matrix before, and we've used it quite a lot here in the past, but what this really showed was that it positively impacts development. So we're always going to look at how we can apply high support to help embed that learning. And lastly, that you know, growth mindset is really key for us here as we go through a brand rechange and we meet resistance through change. But actually, if you remove those learning barriers and those resistance barriers, people do move into a growth mindset, and that means then that they take on the learning that they need to, and they have the impact that we want them to have. So we're going to keep looking at how we remove those resistance barriers as early as possible to keep that learning engagement high. So a really amazing, kind of incredibly intense 10 days, but we got loads of learning out the back of it. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Danny, do you want to share some of the comments in the chat whilst I just get our screen back up?
Yeah, I think there's just everyone's shocked by how much training you got out so quick, Simon. Everyone's kind of massive, like incredibly fast turnaround, incredible. I mentioned that actually there's a huge reliance on technology there, and you've probably had to take a bit of a leap of faith and hope that it all works and comes together. And by the sounds of it, it has. So, I mean, for me personally, it was really good to hear how you've done that and what you've learned off the back of it. I think they're the really key parts, what you've actually learned from doing something like this. And it'd be interesting to keep in touch and understand how you do it moving forward once we're back to what we're calling normality. It'd be good to understand how you do it further on as well. So yeah, thank you for that. It was really, really good.
Really fantastic to hear. Thank you for sharing, for sure. Perhaps we've got a couple of minutes left, just very quickly wrap up on sort of, I guess we've peppered all the way through some of our thoughts on what this means for future, but just to pull all that together into one sort of key summary, there will absolutely be an increase in digital approaches, and that's going to see a boom and a further growth of the digital learning and development market and the technology market as well. I certainly wish I had shares in Zoom right now and other tech forums and platforms, and I think we're going to encourage those to continue to grow and new organisations come on board. And then from a learning and development perspective, that shift from organisations who've been purely delivering via face-to-face will certainly continue, but may look at also increasing their digital delivery. So we're expecting that to grow over the next few years. From a cultural perspective, that probably that L&D permission, that being braver, that being more, I guess, leading on more initiatives that are a little bit more out there, I think is really key. This has been a great chance for us to try things out. A famous quote from Winston Churchill said, you know, never let a good crisis go to waste. And I think there's been a lot of organisations that have just thrown themselves in there and embraced it, and what comes out of that will really shape them and their future. So I think that braveness and that approach just to get you stuck in and try things out and see what results you get will continue on. And then certainly from an engagement perspective, I think the whole shift into technology being used in a more ongoing basis in work as well as in social life will further encourage those who have been a little bit more technology underconfident to get more confident. So you're going to see more of a learner engagement, hopefully, in relation to those digital approaches. And like Simon shared, you know, the demographic for his coaches was that there was a preference for traditional, but actually they've been really responsive when they've needed to get stuck in, and that's hopefully going to lead into more and more of those approaches being used in the future and more engagement. So that's it from us. We just want to thank you thank you for your time. Any questions? We did have a slide on here that had the date of our next sign up for our next roundtable, but we something's not quite gone right there. Must be using the latest version. Apologies, but we're happy to share our roundtable events. You can find them on Eventbrite, and we can get those sent out to you via ELN if you're interested in knowing a little bit more. I think we've got a question in the poll that is asking if you'd like some information on the roundtables. Have been, you know, we've really enjoyed running them. They've been really valuable, you know, from our understanding for the people that have come, and we've been able to pick up a lot from that. So do let us know if you'd like to come along.
I've just popped the link to our Eventbrite page in the chat just now. So if anybody wants to go through, it's got our next 2 or 3 events on there. Next one's on the 13th of May, and we've got Amy Brown as our guest speaker, all around building a strong, positive culture. So if you found this useful, feel free to join. It's a free event, so the link's in the chat for you.
Fantastic.
Thanks very much. Thank you, all of you. Great session, really enjoyable and very, very pertinent. So yeah, I'm sure certainly resonated with me, all the things you were talking about. I know that we're running out of time. I just wanted to draw your attention to other events that the ELN is running, and we've tried, we've tried to step up to the plate, like many have, for the membership by running virtual meetings in Zoom. Like on Monday, we've got one about, you know, tricks for working remotely, but also we've got a lot more webinars scheduled for those who are ready to kind of not just share experiences of lockdown, but actually build on their skills. So just go to the elearningnetwork.org website and you can find out and sign up, etc., etc. So once again, I'd just like to say thank you to all of you. I hope to see some of you again at future sessions. And we'll draw the meeting to a close now. So thanks very much, everybody. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye. Thanks, John.
Bye.